My name is Flora Mitchell. I'm 31. For my parents' 40th anniversary, I flew 3,000 miles with a gift wrapped in gold paper. Before I could even sit down, Mom looked at me and said, "We didn't invite you. Your sister planned this." Then Dad pushed my gift off the table and said, "We don't want anything from the daughter who abandoned us." I picked it up, and I left. When they found out what was inside, what it cost me, what it meant, and who actually paid for the roof over their heads, they drove 14 hours straight to my front door. Before I take you back to the beginning, if you end up liking this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if it genuinely stays with you. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now, let me take you back 5 years, to the day I found out my parents were about to lose their house. I grew up in Hardin, Ohio. Population 4,000, give or take a few who wandered off and never came back. My father, Gerald Mitchell, fixed pipes for a living. My mother, Judith, worked part-time at the grocery store on Route 31. And my older sister, Vivian, 4 years ahead of me in everything, was the sun the whole house orbited around. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's true. Vivian was loud where I was quiet. She told stories at dinner while I cleared the plates. As she brought home report cards with a speech attached, I brought home the same grades and left them on the counter. Dad would hold up Vivian's and say, "That's my girl." Mine stayed on the counter until Mom filed them away. There was this thing Dad used to say at family barbecues. He'd point his beer at Vivian, then at me, and go, "Vivian got the brains, Flora's Flora." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I was 8 the first time I heard it. I was 18 the last time. And the joke never changed. Neither did the audience. I went to nursing school, graduated, got a job offer in Denver, Colorado, and packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. The morning I left, Dad was fixing a pipe under the kitchen sink. I stood in the doorway and said, "Bye, Dad." He didn't come out from under the sink, just said, "Good, one less mouth." That was June 15th, my birthday. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. And I left because staying meant disappearing. And I was already halfway gone. For the first year in Denver, I called home every Sunday, 7 p.m., without fail. Mom picked up sometimes. Dad never did. By the second year, the calls went to voicemail more than they didn't. I texted Vivian about it. "They're busy," she wrote back. "Don't take it personally." Then a week later, "You know how Dad is. He thinks you abandoned us." I sent birthday gifts, Christmas packages, and a hand-knit scarf I spent 3 weekends making for Mom. I never heard a word about any of them. When I asked Vivian, she sighed and said, "I think they threw it away without opening it, Flora. I'm sorry." That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. Then one Thanksgiving, Aunt Martha, Mom's younger sister, called me. We were talking about nothing in particular when she said, "By the way, your mom just loves that scarf you sent, wears it every Sunday to church." I went quiet. "Flora? You there?" "Martha?" "Vivian told me they threw it away." Long pause. Then Martha said very carefully, "That's not what happened." I didn't push her, not that day. But something shifted inside me. A crack in the story I'd been told, just wide enough to see light through. I started paying closer attention to the things Vivian said versus the things that were actually true, and the gap between them kept getting wider. I didn't have proof of anything yet, just a feeling. It's the kind you get when someone's been rearranging the furniture in your life and telling you it was always that way. "Flora, they just don't think about you that much," Vivian had said once. "I'm sorry." She said, "I'm sorry" a lot. It never sounded like she meant it. The call came on a Tuesday, March, 5 years ago. I was 26, pulling a double shift in the ICU, when my phone buzzed with Aunt Martha's name. Her voice was tight. "Honey, I need to tell you something. Your parents are 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a final notice." I leaned against the hallway wall. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that they could lose the house by summer." "Does Vivian know?" "Vivian told them she'd handle it." Pause. "But I haven't seen any payments go through, and your father won't talk about it. You know how he is." That night, I sat in my apartment and stared at the wall for an hour. Then I called the bank, First National in Hardin. I asked to speak to whoever managed residential mortgages. They transferred me to a man named Dave Keller, branch manager. Calm voice, patient. I explained who I was, asked about the account status. He confirmed. 3 months overdue, foreclosure process starting. Then he said something that stopped me cold. Actually, someone else called last week claiming to be a family member, said they'd take care of it. He paused. But they never followed up with any payment. I knew exactly who that was. Vivian had called, made the promise, and never sent a dime. That was the first time I realized my sister wasn't just careless. She was calculating. I told Dave I wanted to set up automatic payments from my account, monthly, anonymous. Don't tell anyone the payments are coming from me, I said. Not my parents, not my sister, no one. He agreed, and I called Martha and said 5 words. Don't tell anyone, especially Vivian. $2,300 a month. That's what invisible love looks like. I was making decent money as a charge nurse at a hospital in Denver. Decent, not rich. After rent, groceries, student loans, and the new mortgage payment, I had about $200 left each month for everything else. So I made choices. No vacations, no dinners out. I bought clothes from Goodwill and furniture from estate sales. When my car needed new tires, I picked the cheapest ones and drove slow in the rain. Tommy Reed, my boyfriend, a carpenter with steady hands and a quiet way of seeing things, figured out what I was doing within 3 months. I didn't tell him. He just noticed I stopped buying coffee on the way to work, and then he noticed the spreadsheet on my laptop, and then he sat down on the bed and said, "It's the house, isn't it?" I nodded. He didn't say I was crazy. He didn't say I should stop. He said, "Okay, I'll fix the porch railing myself so we don't have to hire anyone." That was Tommy. No speeches, just lumber and a level. For 5 years, I worked extra shifts. I picked up holidays, weekends, overnights. I didn't complain. Every month, $2,300 left my account and landed in my parents' mortgage. And every month, the balance got a little smaller. My parents never called. Not once. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not when I got promoted to charge nurse. But the mortgage stayed current. And the foreclosure notices stopped, and the house on Maple Drive stayed standing. I never asked for a thank you, but I didn't know someone else was already getting thanked for what I was doing. Aunt Martha was my only window into what happened back in Hardin. She'd call me every few weeks, careful not to say too much, careful not to say too little. But one evening, about 2 years in, her voice sounded different, harder. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and you're not going to like it." Vivian had told my parents she was the one paying the mortgage. Not helping, not contributing, paying, the whole thing. According to Martha, Dad stood up at Thanksgiving dinner, the table full of cousins, uncles, neighbors, and raised his glass. "To Vivian," he said, "the only one who actually cares about this family." Everyone clapped. Mom cried. Vivian smiled and said, "It's nothing, Dad. You'd do the same for me." It wasn't nothing. It was $2,300 a month that came from my checking account in Denver, every penny of it mine, and my sister was sitting in my parents' dining room, soaking up the credit like sunlight, but it got worse. Martha told me that Vivian used this new status, this borrowed hero badge, to convince Dad to put her name on their bank accounts, to let her manage the family finances. She even got added to the insurance paperwork, all with Dad's grateful blessing. She's positioning herself," Martha said flatly, "and your parents are handing her the keys." I felt sick, but I didn't call them. I didn't expose her. I told myself, as long as the house is safe, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. Then Martha said the thing that cracked me open. "Your father told your cousin Bobby last week, exact words, 'I raised one good daughter and one stranger.'" I hung up, and I didn't call anyone for 3 days. Then the holidays stopped, including me around year 3. Thanksgiving. "Mom's not feeling well," Vivian texted. "Better if you don't come this year." Christmas. "Dad doesn't want any drama. Maybe just call." Easter. Nothing. No text, no call, just silence. But through Martha, I knew the truth. The house was full every holiday. Cousins drove in from Columbus. Uncle Ray brought his famous pie. The neighbors came for dessert. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. Vivian had built a wall around my family and put herself at the gate. And nobody questioned it because, as far as they knew, she was the one keeping the roof over their heads. Meanwhile, I kept paying. Every single month. The balance went from 140,000 down to 80. Then 60. Then 40. I watched the numbers fall on my bank app like some kind of reverse countdown, not to something beginning, but to something ending. Tommy asked me one night while we were doing dishes, "When does this end, Flora?" I dried a plate, set it on the rack. "When the house is paid off," I said. "Then I'll know they're safe. That's enough." He looked at me the way he sometimes did, like he could see the cost of what I was carrying and wished he could split it in half. "Is it, though?" he asked. "Is it enough?" I didn't answer. The final payment cleared in September. 5 years, 60 monthly transfers, $137,412 total. The house on Maple Drive was free and clear, owned outright by Gerald and Judith Mitchell. And 2 weeks later, I got the one thing I never expected, an invitation, sort of. I was scrolling through Facebook on a Sunday morning when I saw it. Vivian's post, bright and public. "Planning Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary party. Family only. October 14th. It's going to be so special." 200 likes, 40 comments. Cousins tagging each other. Neighbors asking what to bring. Uncle Ray promising 3 pies this time. No message to me, no call, no text. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. Then I called Vivian. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Flora, hi. I saw the post. When should I book my flight?" Silence. Then, "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to come. It's their 40th anniversary, Vivian." "I know, but Dad said he doesn't want any awkwardness." "Did Dad say that? Or did you?" Another pause, longer this time. Bet I could hear her recalculating. "I'm just trying to protect everyone, Flora." "From what? From me showing up to my own parents' anniversary?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" She exhaled, sharp and thin. "Look, I just don't want this to turn into a thing. You haven't been around. People will ask questions." "Let them ask." "Flora." "I'll be there." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, from something deeper. 5 years of silence. And my sister was still deciding whether I existed. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tommy rolled over and said, "You're going, aren't you?" "Yeah." "Good." He paused. "What are you bringing?" I thought about it for exactly 1 second. The truth. He didn't ask what I meant, but I think he already knew. And somewhere in that dark room, something inside me shifted from hoping to deciding. "You don't get to erase me from my own family, Vivian. Not anymore." The next morning, I called Dave Keller at First National. "Dave, it's Flora Mitchell." "Flora, good to hear from you. Congratulations, by the way. That last payment went through clean." "That's actually why I'm calling. I need the original mortgage satisfaction certificate and a full statement of all payments made over the past 5 years. Every transaction, every date." He was quiet for a moment. "You sure you want all of that? It shows everything. Your name, your account, every transfer." "That's exactly why I want it. Give me a few days. I'll have it all notarized and ready." The package arrived the following week. A thick manila envelope from First National Bank. Inside, the payoff certificate, crisp, official, stamped with the bank seal. Behind it, 60 pages of transaction records. My name on every single one. I also wrote a letter. 1 page handwritten on plain white paper. I won't tell you what it said, not yet. But I'll say this. It took me 4 tries to get through it without crying, and when I finally sealed it, my hands were steady. I put everything into a box. A nice one, sturdy, from the craft store on 6th. Then I wrapped it in gold paper. Not because I'm fancy, but because it was my parents' wedding color. 40 years ago, their cake had gold ribbons. Mom kept one in her jewelry box for decades. I thought she'd remember. The morning of my flight, Tommy drove me to the airport. At the curb, he held my bag while I stood there with the gold box tucked under my arm. "Whatever happens," he said, "you already did the right thing." 5 years of the right thing. I kissed him and walked inside. I didn't know then that I'd be back in less than 24 hours, without the box. The flight from Denver to Columbus was 3 hours and 12 minutes. I spent all of it with the gold box on my lap, running my thumb along the edge of the wrapping. I rented a car at the airport, a small gray sedan. Drove east on I-70 for an hour and a half until the highway narrowed into two-lane roads and the landscape turned into the flat, green, wide-open Ohio I remembered. Grain silos, white churches, that gas station on Route 31 that's been closing soon since I was in middle school. I turned onto Maple Drive at 4:15 in the afternoon, and there it was, the house. Same brown siding, same chain-link fence, same cracked driveway. But today there were balloons tied to the mailbox. A homemade banner hung across the porch, Happy 40th Gerald and Judith. Cars lined both sides of the street. I counted at least 20. I parked at the end of the block, cut the engine, sat there. Through the front windows I could see people moving. I could hear music, something country, turned up just enough to leak through the walls. Laughter. Voices layered over each other the way they do when a room is full. 60 people inside, and not one of them expecting me. And I looked at the gold box on the passenger seat. The corner of the wrapping had creased during the flight. I smoothed it with my fingertip. What if they still don't want me? What if I walk in there and nothing changes? I sat for 10 minutes, watched the light shift through the trees. Then I picked up the box, opened the car door, and stepped onto the sidewalk. The front door was 30 yards away. It might as well have been 3,000 miles. Then I opened the screen door and stepped inside. The living room had been rearranged. Tables pushed together in an L shape, covered in white cloth. Folding chairs borrowed from the church lined every wall. Flower arrangements sat on every flat surface. Vivian's touch, no doubt. A slideshow played on a laptop in the corner. Photos of Mom and Dad through the years. I wasn't in many of them. A few heads turned, then a few more. Mrs. Patterson, our old neighbor, was the first to speak. "Flora? Oh my goodness! We haven't seen you in years!" She said it loud enough that half the room heard. Conversations dimmed. Forks paused. Eyes moved from me to the gold box in my hands, then back to me. I scanned the room. Uncle Ray by the food table, Cousin Bobby near the window. A dozen faces I half recognized, and a dozen I didn't. Then I found her. Aunt Martha. She was standing near the kitchen doorway with a glass of iced tea, and the moment she saw me, her hand froze halfway to her mouth. But her eyes dropped to the box, then widened. She knew. She knew exactly what I was carrying. We looked at each other across the room. 5 years of secret keeping passed between us in a single glance. I could see the question on her face. "Are you sure?" I gave a small nod. Martha set her glass down and pressed her lips together. Then she nodded back. Just once. Firm. Behind me, the screen door creaked shut. In front of me, the murmur of the room rebuilt itself. Quieter now, but with a new frequency underneath, the low hum of something unexpected. People were watching, and I hadn't even said a word yet. Vivian was mid-sentence when she saw me. She'd been standing at the head of the table with a champagne glass, giving what sounded like the tail end of a toast. "And I'm so grateful I could give back to you both, especially with the house. Everything I've done, I did out of love." Applause, a few raised glasses, and Dad nodded from his chair like a king receiving tribute. Then Vivian's eyes drifted past the crowd and landed on me. The change was instant, not dramatic. She was too practiced for that. Just a flicker, a tightening around the mouth. Then the smile came back, wider, warmer, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. She set down her glass and walked toward me, every step measured. When she got close, she leaned in, not a hug, just close enough to whisper, "What are you doing here?" I told you Dad doesn't want you here." "I came to give Mom and Dad their gift," I said. My voice was even. My hands were not. Vivian glanced at the gold box. "What is that? Some last-minute thing from the airport gift shop?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You should go, before Dad sees you." But it was too late. Across the room, Dad had turned in his chair, and Mom, sitting beside him, was already staring. In that moment, And I remembered something Dave Keller had said when he handed me the documents. Miss Mitchell, this is one of the most selfless things I've seen in 20 years at this bank. Your parents are lucky. Lucky. Standing in that living room, watching my sister block my path and my father's jaw tighten at the sight of me. Lucky felt like a word from someone else's language. But I kept walking. Mom saw me before Dad said anything. She was sitting to his left in a padded folding chair, her hands resting on a paper napkin she'd folded into a tiny square. When our eyes met, something moved across her face. Surprise, maybe relief, maybe guilt. I couldn't tell. It was there for half a second, then gone. The room was getting quieter. People were watching now, the way people watch when they can feel something coming but don't know what. Flora. Mom's voice was small. We didn't invite you. Your sister planned this. 60 people heard it. And I know because I could feel every single pair of eyes land on me at once. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick. It pressed against my skin. I know, I said. I came anyway. I have something for you and Dad. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at me. I don't know what I expected to see on his face. Surprise, maybe. Curiosity. Something human. What I got was stone. His mouth set in a flat line, his eyes narrow, and his arms folded across the front of his pressed Sunday shirt, like a gate swinging shut. He didn't say anything yet, but his body said everything. Behind me, I could feel Vivian moving closer. Beside me, the quiet hum of 60 people deciding whether to look away or lean in. Aunt Martha hadn't moved from her spot near the kitchen, but I could feel her watching me like a lighthouse watches a boat in bad water. I took another step forward, toward the table, toward my parents. But the gold box felt heavier than it had in the car. I didn't come to cause trouble, I said. I came because it's your 40th anniversary, and I'm your daughter. Dad's eyes dropped to the box, and his jaw tightened. I set the box on the table, right between the flower arrangement and the anniversary cake with its gold frosting letters. The wrapping caught the overhead light and flashed, just for a second, like something precious. Dad stared at it. His jaw worked side to side, the way it always did when he was building toward something. Then he reached out and pushed it, not gently, not a nudge, a flat-palmed shove that sent the box sliding across the tablecloth and off the edge. It hit the floor with a dull thud. One corner of the gold paper tore open. The room gasped, not loudly, more like 60 people inhaling at the same time. We don't want any cheap thing from you. Dad's voice was loud enough for the back row, for the cousins by the window, kick for the neighbors near the door. He wanted everyone to hear. You show up when you feel like it, disappear for years, and you think a box fixes everything? I didn't move. He pointed at Vivian. Your sister's been here. Vivian paid for this house. She planned this party. She showed up. Where were you? Vivian stood behind him, arms crossed, chin lifted. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her face said it all, that careful, well-practiced look of someone who'd already won and was just watching the other side realize it. A few guests shifted in their seats. Mrs. Patterson looked at her lap. Uncle Ray set down his fork. Cousin Bobby took a step backward, like the air near the table had turned sour. I looked at my father. My eyes were burning, my throat was tight, but my voice, when it came, was steady. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. I bent down and picked up the box. The torn corner of the gold paper hung loose. I smoothed it back into place with my thumb, carefully, the way you'd fix a child's bandage. I took my time. The whole room watched. Then I straightened up, looked at my father, looked at my mother, looked at Vivian. I didn't come here to beg, I said. I came to give you something I spent 5 years working for, but I won't stand here and be humiliated for loving you. Nobody moved. I turned around, walked past the folding chairs, past the slideshow still cycling through old photos, past Uncle Ray with his hands on his knees and Mrs. Patterson pressing a napkin to her mouth. 60 people, and not one of them said a word. Not one of them stood up. The only sound was my shoes on the hardwood and the low country song still playing from the speaker in the corner like it hadn't gotten the memo. Aunt Martha was standing near the front door, When I reached her, she caught my arm. Not hard, just enough to stop me. As she looked at the box, then at me. Her eyes were full and fierce. "Leave it with me," she whispered. "Trust me." I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to take it home, shove it in a closet, and never think about Hardin, Ohio again. But Martha's hand was steady, and her eyes said what her mouth didn't. "I've been quiet long enough." I placed the gold box in her hands. Then I walked out the front door, down the porch steps, and into the October air. I didn't look back. But I heard it. My mother saying my name. Just once. Very softly. And then nothing. Driving away from that street, I kept asking myself, why did I keep hoping? 5 years I'd paid their mortgage, and what did I get? A box shoved off a table and a door closed behind me. Have you ever given everything to someone who didn't even notice? Who looked right past your sacrifice and thanked someone else for it? What would you have done? Would you have left the box or taken it with you? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know. I was already on the highway when it started. I didn't see it happen, but Martha told me every detail later, and she's not a woman who exaggerates. If anything, she undersells. So when she told me what went down in that living room after I left, I believed every word. Here's what happened. The party tried to recover. Vivian clapped her hands and said, "Okay, everyone, let's not let this ruin Mom and Dad's night." Who wants cake?" A few people murmured. Someone picked up a fork. The music kept playing. But Martha didn't move. She stood near the door, holding my gold box, watching the room try to paste itself back together. She told me later she felt like she was holding a grenade with the pin already out. 5 years of someone else's lie, sitting right there in her hands. She walked to the center of the room. "Before anyone touches that cake," she said loud and clear, "there's something you all need to see." Gerald's head snapped up. "Martha, stay out of this." "No." Martha set the box on the table, the same table Dad had pushed it off of 2 minutes ago. "I've stayed out of it for 5 years. That ends tonight." Vivian moved fast. "Aunt Martha, this isn't the time." "Oh, this is exactly the time, Vivian." The room went absolutely still. Not quiet. Still. Like the air itself had stopped moving. Martha opened the box. Inside, and the manila envelope from First National Bank. The letter, sealed in its white envelope. Everything Flora had carried 3,000 miles to give her parents. Martha pulled out the envelope first, held it up so everyone could see the bank's return address. Then she opened it. Martha unfolded the certificate and held it at arm's length. Her reading glasses were already on. She'd put them on while walking to the table, like she'd been planning this for years. Maybe she had. She read it out loud, every word. "Mortgage satisfaction for 1427 Maple Drive, Hardin, Ohio, paid in full as of September 14th. Payoff completed by..." She paused, looked at Gerald, then at the room. "Flora Rose Mitchell. Total paid, $137,412. Silence. Not the awkward silence of before. This was something else. This was 60 people understanding all at once that the ground beneath them had shifted. Martha reached back into the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. 60 pages, bank statements, transaction records. She held them up and fanned through them slowly. 5 years of payments, she said. $2,300 every month, from Flora's account in Denver. Her name, her money, every single line. Someone in the back row whispered, "Oh my God." I'm told Mrs. Patterson covered her mouth with both hands. Uncle Ray pushed his chair back from the table. Yet Cousin Bobby just stood there staring at Vivian. Gerald didn't move. His hand, the same hand that had shoved the box off the table, was gripping the edge of his chair, shaking. Mom pressed both palms flat against her face. Her shoulders started to move before any sound came out. Then the sound came, and it was the kind of crying that doesn't care who hears it. Martha lowered the papers. She looked directly at Gerald. "This is what was inside that cheap thing you just threw on the floor. The 5 years, $137,000, from the daughter you said didn't care." Nobody breathed. Gerald turned to Vivian. His face was something I wish I could have seen. Martha described it as a man watching his own house catch fire, every line, every crease, rearranging itself around a new understanding. You told me you were paying the mortgage. His voice was flat, dangerously flat. Vivian's face had gone white. Not pink, not flushed, white. It's like someone had pulled a plug somewhere behind her eyes. I helped, she said. I contributed. Martha didn't flinch. Really? Because Dave Keller at First National confirmed that every payment, every single one, came from one account. Flora's. Not a dollar from you, Vivian. She paused. Not one. That's not. I meant I helped in other ways. A voice from the back. Aunt Donna, Gerald's sister, 70 years old and sharp as a kitchen knife. In what way? Exactly? Vivian opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. The room turned. You could feel it, like a tide reversing. The people who'd been nodding along to Vivian's toast 10 minutes ago were now staring at her, the way you stare at someone you've just realized you don't know at all. Uncle Ray shook his head slowly. Mrs. Patterson wouldn't even look in Vivian's direction. Cousin Bobby crossed his arms and leaned against the windowsill, his jaw tight. As Vivian took a step backward, then another. No one moved toward her. No one defended her. The silence around her was total. Gerald was still gripping the chair, but he wasn't looking at Vivian anymore. He was looking at the front door. The door Flora had walked through. The door he hadn't stopped her from reaching. The bank statement doesn't twist, Vivian. That was Martha. Quiet now, almost gentle. Almost. Martha reached into the box one more time. There's one more thing, she said. At the white envelope, my handwriting on the front, Mom and Dad. Martha looked at Gerald. Do you want to read this yourself, or do you want me to? Gerald didn't answer. His hands were shaking too badly to hold paper. Mom was still crying. The quiet kind now, the kind that comes after the loud kind runs out of air. Martha opened the letter. She read it slowly. Not all of it. She told me later she couldn't get through the whole thing without her voice breaking. So she gave them the parts that mattered most. Mom and Dad, I know you think I left because I didn't care, but I left so I could take care of you from where I was strong enough to. This house is yours. It always was. I just made sure nobody could take it away. Martha paused, steadied herself. I love you. I always have, even when you didn't see me. She folded the letter and set it on the table in front of Gerald. The room was wrecked. There's no other word for it. The older women were wiping their eyes with napkins. Uncle Ray had his head bowed. Two of the neighbors quietly headed for the door, not out of disrespect, but because they knew this wasn't their moment anymore. Mom reached across the table and pressed her fingers against the letter like she was touching Flora's face. Gerald sat there with his elbows on his knees and his head in his hands. 64 years old, and the man looked like he'd aged a decade in 5 minutes. Vivian was gone. At some time during the letter, she'd taken her purse and slipped out the back door without a word. Nobody noticed. Gerald pulled out his phone before Martha even finished putting the letter down. He dialed my number. I was merging onto I-70 West, the gold evening light cutting through the windshield, and I saw his name flash on the screen. I stared at it until it went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Mom took the phone from him, dialed me herself. I watched her name appear. Judith Mitchell. I hadn't seen that on my screen in 3 years. Voicemail. Back in the living room, Martha told me this part. Gerald set the phone on the table and just stared at it, like he was waiting for it to ring itself, like technology might fix what he'd broken with his own hands. Martha said, She's probably on her way to the airport. She flew 3,000 miles for you, Gerald, and you didn't even let her sit down. He didn't respond. The guests began to leave. One by one, and then in groups, they gathered their coats and plates and murmured things like, beautiful party, that no one believed. The cake sat untouched. The banner still hung across the porch. Happy 40th. Old Mr. Holloway, the neighbor who'd lived across the street since before I was born, stopped at the door on his way out. He put his hand on Gerald's shoulder. You know, Gerald, he said, I always thought Flora was the quiet one. Turns out quiet doesn't mean gone. Gerald didn't look up. After everyone left, it was just Gerald and Judith at the table. Paper plates, cold food, a banner swaying in the draft from the screen door, and a letter from a daughter they hadn't spoken to in years, sitting open on the table between them. Martha told me they sat at that table for 3 hours. Judith didn't move the letter. She kept her hand on it like an anchor. Gerald read the bank statements, all 60 pages, one by one, running his finger down the columns of numbers. Every month. Every amount. My name, repeated 60 times like a heartbeat he'd been too deaf to hear. Around 11 o'clock, Martha went home. She'd offered to stay, but Gerald waved her off without looking up. Go, Martha. We need to sit with this. At midnight, Gerald finally spoke. I pushed it off the table, Judy. Judith looked at him. I pushed my own daughter's heart off the table. His voice cracked on the word heart. Martha told me later that she'd called Judith the next morning. And Judith said it was the first time in 40 years of marriage she'd heard Gerald Mitchell cry. Not tear up, cry. Judith put her hand over his. Then we drive, she said. It's 14 hours. Then we leave now. Gerald looked at her. Something passed between them. Not words, not even a decision. More like a surrender. The kind that happens when you finally stop fighting the thing you already know is true. At 3 in the morning, Gerald backed his pickup out of the driveway. And Judith climbed in with a thermos of coffee and the gold box, rewrapped by Martha before she left. They pulled onto Route 31 heading west. Didn't call ahead, didn't text, just drove. The odometer turned over mile after mile in the dark. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado. 14 hours. At that exact moment, I was 30,000 feet in the air, flying home, staring at the empty seat next to me where a gold-wrapped box used to be. As Tommy was waiting at Denver International when I walked out of the terminal. He didn't ask how it went. He could see it on my face. He just picked up my bag, put his arm around my shoulders, and walked me to the truck. We drove home in silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind where someone loves you enough to know that words would only make it heavier. When we got inside, I sat down on the couch. I didn't take off my jacket, didn't turn on the lights. It just sat there in the dark living room while Tommy locked the front door and put the kettle on. Then it hit me. Not slowly, not like a wave building, like a wall falling. I pressed my face into the throw pillow and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. Loud, graceless, shaking. Tommy sat beside me. He put his hand on my back and he didn't say a word. Not, it's okay, not, they don't deserve you, not any of the things people say when they don't know what else to offer. He just stayed. After a long time, I sat up, wiped my face with my sleeve, turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from anyone in Ohio. Not tonight, not yet. The next morning, I did what I always do. Got up at 5, made coffee, sat on the front porch in my bathrobe with the mug warm in my hands, watching the Denver sky lighten from black to gray to blue. Was I wrong to go? Was I wrong to hope? I kept turning it over, like a stone in my pocket I couldn't stop touching. And at exactly 6:07 a.m., I heard a car pull up. I didn't recognize the truck at first. A dusty white pickup, road grime on the fenders, Ohio plates. It parked crooked against the curb, like whoever was driving had stopped in a hurry. The engine ticked in the morning quiet. Then the driver's door opened, and my father stepped out. Gerald Mitchell, 64 years old, rumpled flannel shirt, same one from the party, eyes red-rimmed. Hair pushed to one side from 14 hours of leaning against a headrest. He looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Mom came around from the passenger side. She was holding the gold box, rewrapped, the torn corner patched with fresh tape. She clutched it against her chest like it might fly away. They stood at the end of my walkway, 20 feet of concrete between us. Dad didn't move. He just stood there, his hands at his sides, his mouth working like he was chewing on something that wouldn't go down. 14 hours of driving, and he still didn't know what to say first. I stayed on the porch, coffee in hand, bathrobe, bare feet on cold wood. We looked at each other. The neighborhood was waking up. A dog barked somewhere. A sprinkler hissed on 2 doors down. The whole ordinary world kept moving around us while we stood still. Then my father spoke. His voice was hoarse, stripped down to nothing. I'm sorry, Flora. 3 words, 7 letters, and they were the 3 words I'd waited my entire life to hear from that man. He swallowed, tried again. I pushed away the only person who was actually holding us up. I didn't run to him. I didn't collapse. I stood on my porch with my coffee getting cold, and I let those words land where they needed to land. Mom broke first. She came up the walkway with the box still pressed against her, tears already falling, and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She didn't try to come up. She waited. I knew. Her voice was barely there. Deep down, I knew Vivian wasn't telling the truth. I saw things that didn't add up, and I told myself it wasn't my place to question. But I was scared. Scared of your father, scared of losing Vivian, scared of everything. She looked up at me. I let him push your gift off the table, Flora, in front of everyone, and I just sat there. I know. Mom. I'll never forgive myself for that. I looked at her for a long time, at the box in her arms, at the tape on the corner, at the dark circles under her eyes. Then I stepped aside and held the door open. Come in, I said. Both of you. It wasn't warm. I want to be honest about that. I didn't fall into anyone's arms. I made tea. I set out mugs. I moved through my own kitchen with the steady efficiency of a woman who's spent 5 years taking care of people without being thanked for it. And then I let that rhythm carry me because it was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. Tommy came out of the bedroom, said a quiet hello, shook Gerald's hand, and disappeared into the garage. He knew this wasn't his conversation. We sat at my kitchen table, the $4 estate sale table I'd eaten 1,000 quiet dinners at, and I said the thing I'd carried even longer than the mortgage. I love you, but I won't go back to being invisible. Mom nodded, fast and broken. And Dad just looked at his hands. I'm glad you came, I said. But showing up once doesn't erase 5 years of silence. Dad nodded. He didn't argue, didn't explain, didn't tell me I was being unfair. That, more than the apology, told me something had actually shifted. Over the next hour, they told me what happened after I left the party. The news traveled the way news always does in a small town, fast and without mercy. By Sunday morning, and half of Hardin knew that Vivian Mitchell had lied about paying her parents' mortgage. By Monday, the other half knew. The church prayer group, the grocery store, the diner on Main where Dad had coffee every morning. People didn't confront Vivian directly. They didn't have to. They just stopped calling, stopped waving, stopped saving her a seat. In a town of 4,000, silence is its own verdict. Gerald told me he'd removed Vivian's name from every joint account. Went to the bank that Tuesday, sat across from Dave Keller, who handled it without a single "I told you so," and signed the papers himself. She had access to things she shouldn't have, Dad said quietly. That's on me. They also hired a local attorney to audit everything Vivian had touched. It was precautionary, Dad said. But the look on his face told me he was afraid of what they'd find. Vivian, for her part, sent a group text to the whole family 3 days after the party. A long, winding message about how Martha had manipulated the situation and turned everyone against her. She called herself the real victim. Nobody replied. Martha sent me a screenshot and a single line. The whole town's talking, not about the money, about the kind of person you are. I read it twice. Then I put my phone down and went back to work. Before they left, I sat them down one more time. The tea was cold by then. The morning sun had moved across the kitchen floor and reached the far wall. We'd been talking for 3 hours, and most of it had been them talking. I'd listened. Now it was my turn. If we're going to rebuild this, I said, I need a few things. Dad straightened in his chair. Mom folded her hands. I need you to call me, not just when something goes wrong, regularly. I need to hear from you because you want to, not because you feel guilty. Dad nodded. I need you to stop letting one person decide who's in this family and who's not. That goes for Vivian, and it goes for anyone else. Another nod. And I need you to never, ever let anyone speak for me again. If you want to know how I feel, ask me. Not my sister, not a neighbor, me. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, Tommy's saw started up in the garage, a faint buzz through the wall. Dad cleared his throat. Can I? He stopped, started again. Can I hug you? I looked at him for a long time. This man who'd called me one less mouth, who'd pushed my gift off a table in front of 60 people, who'd driven 14 hours through the night with red eyes and a cracked voice to stand in my driveway and say 3 words. I stood up, walked around the table, and let him hold me. It wasn't forgiveness yet. I want to be clear about that. It was a door I chose to leave open, and there's a difference. I don't need you to make up for the past, I said into his shoulder. I need you to show up for the future. He held on tighter. That was 3 months ago. Dad calls every Sunday now. 7 p.m., without fail. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes it's 10 minutes about the weather and what Tommy's building in the garage. But he calls, every week. He hasn't missed one. Mom sends handwritten cards. And not long letters, just little notes on the floral stationery she's used since I was a kid. Thinking of you. Saw a cardinal today and remembered you loved them. Small things, real things. They flew to Denver for Christmas. First time either of them had been on a plane in 20 years. Dad white-knuckled the armrests the whole flight. Mom brought homemade cookies packed in 3 layers of bubble wrap. We ate dinner at my $4 estate sale table, and nobody mentioned the empty chair where Vivian might have sat. Vivian. People ask about her. I didn't cut her off. That's not what this is. I just stopped chasing. If she wants to be in my life, she knows where to find me. But she doesn't get to rewrite the story anymore. I went back to work at the hospital the Monday after everything happened. Clocked in, checked vitals, changed IVs. The world doesn't pause because your family finally sees you. It just keeps going, and you go with it. That Tommy asked me one evening while we were washing dishes. Same spot, same question, different weight behind it. So was it worth it? All 5 years? I set a plate on the rack. Same rack, same plate, same life, but different. Every single month. I'm not telling you to pay off someone's mortgage to earn their love. That's not the lesson. The lesson is simpler. Don't let anyone convince you that your kindness makes you weak. And don't ever let anyone else narrate your story. And I didn't win my parents back with money. I won them back by refusing to disappear. When I tell this story, I still wonder, should I have told the truth sooner? If I'd called my parents 5 years ago and said, "It's me, I'm the one paying your mortgage," maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe Dad would have believed me. Or maybe Vivian would have found a way to twist that too. What do you think? Should I have told my parents from the start? Or was keeping it quiet the right call? I've gone back and forth on this 100 times and I still don't have a clean answer. Let me know in the comments. I'd honestly love to hear what you'd have done differently. That's my story. Whether you've been the Flora in your family, or you know someone who has, I hope it reminds you that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes the people who make the least noise carry the most weight. If this story meant something to you, please hit like and subscribe. And if you want another story about someone who refused to be underestimated, check the link in the description. I picked it just for you. Thank you for staying with me all the way through. I'll see you in the next one.